Learning a language in 3 months. Is it possible? Well, this is something that you see very often online. Just one look over YouTube, you already see many people attempting to learn language in a week. Like most people, my first experience with learning languages was at school, in which we were forced to learn Spanish, and that was back in 2018. At first, I was finding the idea that the school is actually holding me back from learning the language. I felt like most of the time was spent giving instructions and then just waiting for the teacher to tell us what to do, than actually getting some work done and getting exposure to the language. And so, why did I spend some time on my own with learning the language? It was because I felt afraid that if I progressed a lot, I would be still kept in the same class and all my work will be wasted, and then we will have to cover the same material again. So what I learned from this first experience with languages was that it's very important to take control of your own language learning. For example, you can't depend on a single language learning app to provide you with everything that you need to know. It usually has a very set in stone language learning path in which they tell you what vocabulary to learn and what expressions to know, but you also have to do things on your own outside of that. So basically, the lesson here is just do what you think actually really helps you. It should be at least enjoyable. So for me, if I did exactly what the teacher wants me to do and memorize exact things that the teacher wants me to memorize, I probably wouldn't get far because I'm not doing anything outside of that. That's obviously not enough time spent with the language. So in September 2019, I started to really focus on my language learning. So I decided to just write the most common words down in a notebook. The idea is that in conversations, in daily interactions, there's certain words that pop up all the time and that we could use to convey basically almost any information. I spent almost every single day pouring myself over my notebook and trying to get the words to stick in my mind. I had no idea how these words would be used in context in a sentence. It's basically just loose strands of information sitting around in my brain that cannot be used. And it might as well be useless information that will probably get quickly forgotten, going down maybe a week or so. Comprehensible input basically means that you understand 70 to 80% of the words inside a certain text or in some sort of audio or dialogue. By being able to at least understand some of it, keeps you interested in it, and it also keeps your morale up. It shouldn't be so easy that you don't learn anything new. For example, if you're listening to some audio and you understand most of it, but you just have some words that you can't really figure out based on the context, you'll just pull up the transcript of the audio and you'll just look up the words on the dictionary and perhaps write it down somewhere. And it was during around this time that I started looking for newer methods, some better methods. It seems like there's always a new revolutionary app or a new revolutionary method for language learning. And all this information is just coming, it was coming at me all at once. I didn't know which one to try and which one to throw out. So it was at this point that I realized that everyone has their own way of learning things. There's no guilt in not being able to follow someone else's method that might work for them, but not necessarily for you. I also felt deep down that I'm not really putting enough effort into it. But in the end, all that matters is that whatever method you use, whatever way of teaching yourself a language, uh, it must be fun and it also must not get you burned out, and you also have to do it every single day. Nevertheless, I discovered the app called Tandem in 2020, and I was able to meet some incredible people along the way, which really helped me touch with the language and I guess connect to it. I talked almost every single day with this guy called Naeem, but despite being friends with such a great guy, my morale dipped a lot because I've been spending like about every single day trying to speak to someone for maybe 2 months on end. And you would expect that this will seriously improve my language learning because people say you gotta speak language to actually be able to speak it. and to actually get better at it, you have to practice a lot. So I thought I was practicing it a lot and I was really putting in the hours, I guess. But I didn't really see much progress being made. And so when the school year came around and I was in a new school and I have a new Spanish teacher, the new Spanish teacher evaluated my Spanish level, my speaking skill, to see where I stand and what class that I would be placed in. And it didn't exactly give a good impression, despite all my boasting. And this was when I realized that the quality of work that you put into language learning, just like almost with any other skill, it's very important. It's important to be very intentional with all the activities you incorporate for your language learning. For example, when I was speaking with Naeem, something that I could have done that's more intentional is I could have written the words that I want to use beforehand in the conversation and actually use them, or some expressions. And then maybe like if I learn some things from the conversation, I could write it down, and then next time I could try to use it. And this will really slowly build up my conversation levels. And it was in June or July of 2020 that I also added French in as well, because I really loved how the language sounded. And it was in November or December that I finally had my first language breakthrough in Spanish, in which I was able to have a decent conversation and speak quite fluently, and I felt so good about myself, being able to express what I need and just being able to get the words out. And this was the first time I experienced the true joy of seeing all the progress you have made. And this really fueled my motivation going forward. And in April 2021, I also added Russian to a list of languages I'm learning. When you look at Russian, you'll realize how hard the grammar really is. Endless case endings and the rules for when to use each case, and there's tons of exceptions, and the genders really get complicated, and there's even imperfective and perfected aspect to every single verbs. So that means that you have to memorize 2 times the verbs just to explain something. And it seems like these periods don't even share any pattern. So instead of like smacking your head and ripping your hair out over these grammar tables, I resort back to the concept that I mentioned before, that comprehensible inputs, as always, is super important. By looking at a lot of Russian text, which I understand decently well, or with some translation on the side, I was able to eventually understand some of the endings and see when endings sound right, and the grammar will just come to you kind of naturally. And I'm not saying that all these grammar tables were useless. It's just a nice reference that I could go back to time and to see if there's anything that I need to brush up. Just a summary of all of the grammar patterns that I've noticed in the text, all compiled in one place. And now even today, I notice in French and Spanish, on Sundays, everything is just flowing out of my mouth so smoothly, everything is perfect, and I feel like I'm really able to enjoy these human interactions with the speakers. But other days, I feel like I'm a complete idiot, and I could barely even say like how are you or stuff like that, or even greet someone in the language. So it seems like my language ability really just comes and goes depending on how much attention I put on each of these languages. But for now, I try to keep it very consistent and try to switch between the languages every single day. And so this brings me to the next point. Learning languages is a super long process. There's no such thing as fluency. Like, what do you consider being fluent as? Any person on the internet could easily present themselves as a language guru who knows 15, 20 languages by just being able to present themselves and say hello. And being fluent in a language isn't like I wake up the next day and snap, I'm instantly fluent and I can speak freely. That's not how it works. It's just a slow process and you're always learning something more. One day you might be able to realize that you actually came a far way and that you could actually speak decently. As a matter of fact, for me, the motivation doesn't lie in the future about what I could possibly do with the language. Instead, I find that what really keeps me going is just the simple enjoyment of the process. Every time that I realize that I can recognize a word that I've been struggling for a while to try to memorize. I get a rush of dopamine with the sense of progress, with the instant feedback that I actually remember the word after all the failures in the past. It just makes me feel successful and conquering little challenges. Okay, so here's a quick tip for comprehensible input. As you can see, I have DeepL open, and on the left side, I have the original text in Russian, and on the right side, I have the translation. And now, so what I do is I read the text first in Russian, and I whenever there's something that I don't really understand, I just quickly look at the translation, and I keep on reading. And this way, I could quickly go through a lot of content and maybe get used to structure and some vocabulary, but at the same time, I don't spend too much time over some text and having to pull up the dictionary all the time. This just makes it super quick. If you guys like this video, please definitely share it. You guys have any suggestions, please tell me. And any encouragement would be really thankful. And it would definitely motivate me to keep moving forward and make some more videos, perhaps more high quality videos. I'm trying to get the hang of editing and adding effects and stuff like this using DaVinci Resolve, but it's been such a challenge so far. And I'm hoping that I'll learn better, get better at this as time goes on. Really thankful that you guys have stick to the end if you're still there. And please like and subscribe, and you're definitely going to really like these new videos, these new video ideas that have coming up. There's a bunch of challenges that I think will be super interesting to see.